Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley, and I'm a PhD student at Brandeis. And today I'm going to talk to you about my journey to science. I titled this talk Brains and Communities because I research brains and communities have been really important to me in my development to getting to the point of doing research. So to start off with, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. So my mom was a welder and my dad is a mechanic. All of my family has worked blue collar, working class jobs. My grandma retired from Walmart. And a lot of my family lives in rural areas throughout the South and especially in Appalachia, which is this mountain range up through the eastern part of the United States. And it's a historically really impoverished part of America. And I grew up personally in a medically underserved, low income part of Tennessee, and I received food stamps and WIC benefits when I was a kid. And I'm the first in my family to go to college. So when I went to high school, I went to a public high school. It was really overfilled. It was a military town, so people were moving in and out from all over the place. And it was a little underfunded. And there was a high percentage of minorities, about 70% racial minorities. And it also had a really low proficiency rate for math. It was like a 6% rate, which is 6 times lower than the national average. So at the time, I thought I didn't like math, but it turns out I just didn't have access to good quality instruction in math. But what I did love was my science classes, especially biology, and my art classes. So I loved science and I loved being creative, and I would do whatever I could to do both of those. At the time, I didn't really have any guidance when it came to applying to colleges, but I took the ACT, which is like the SAT here, and I got a really good score. So I qualified for this scholarship at Western Kentucky University, which is a college about an hour away from where I lived at the time. And I decided to take it because it was a full ride. It covered my tuition, it covered my books. So I didn't have to pay for anything and I didn't have to go into debt, which was really scary for me as the first to go to college in my family. And all I had to pay for was food. So then I went to WKU. This is a picture of campus during the spring when there's cherry blossoms. But when I first got there, it was a little intimidating at first. I was shy and I was scared to talk to the other students and meet people and all of the things like that. But when I started taking classes, I started to thrive. I loved taking classes about different cultures and societies and how they differ around the world, places I'd never heard of and didn't know anything about. And I also learned about how we think and how our brains are made up of different parts and regions. And you could even look at brain activity in real time. So I really fell in love with getting to learn about this stuff that I didn't even know you could learn when I was in high school. And I found really school was fun and interesting. And I met a ton of other people who also really loved the same things I did and learning about the same things I did. And that really helped me to start making friends who share the same interests that I had. It was still a struggle sometimes because I was working part-time to pay for food while I was in school. So I worked retail jobs, and I also worked at the library, and I did tutoring and things like that, while balancing that with being involved in extracurriculars, different clubs, and leadership roles. I was doing volunteer work, and I was also doing research. So it felt like a lot, and sometimes it was too much, I think. So, um, but I found a support system that really helped me get through all of that and learn when to take things off my plate, and learn how to create that balancing act. I also found myself sometimes confused by the college system itself. At one point, I was scared I might have to drop out or go into debt because I was hit with this really large fee for taking too many credit hours in one semester. It turned out fine. But I created these support systems and relied on them to help me get through experiences like that. I found professors and other students who made me feel comfortable and understood, and that really made the experience much easier for me. So I first started doing research in a perception lab, and they study haptic and visual sensory perception. And haptics is when you touch an object, but also move your hand and your fingers at the same time. It's how we touch most things in the real world. You don't just touch it with one finger and then you're done. And the professor that I was doing that research with was actually the first professor I had met in my life or on campus because he had been assigned to me as my psychology major advisor. He was so patient with me when we first met, and the rest of the time I knew him, answered all of my questions. I had so many. And he also treated me like an equal, which felt so different from my high school experience. So I asked if I could do research in his lab, and he said yes. And I really recommend keeping kind people like that who you meet in your support network. My first job in the lab was to hide behind a curtain and hand these 3D printed bell peppers to people to feel with different numbers of fingers. It was super weird. So we would tape their fingers with like duct tape, so they had a different number to actually use during the task. But it was so fun. And I realized how creative science could be. It's not just art that's creative. At the same time, I was still really interested in these classes I was taking about culture and social interaction. And so I found this anthropology professor who I liked, who helps me make an undergraduate thesis research project. So it's like a big research project that you develop yourself based on my own interests and studying prejudice. And so I was looking at prejudice against Muslim populations. I had all of these friends on campus who were from the Middle East, and I saw how people treated them locally. And I was interested how that varies between different countries. At the same time, I wanted to study abroad. So I was able to develop this research project to compare prejudice against Muslim populations in the US and the UK. And the grants I applied for my research then funded me to study abroad. It's really hard for first-gen students to study abroad a lot of the time, but because I was doing research there, it was completely funded. So I didn't have to work a ridiculous amount of hours over the summer to try to pay for it. It covered my tuition, the program costs, and my flights there and back. And the experience was amazing. It was a completely different kind of science than what I did before. I was interviewing participants, and instead of hiding behind a curtain, I was right there with them. And I had to be really impartial while I was listening to them talk, and I audio recorded the interviews, and then I transcribed them later. So I wrote up what they said, and I analyzed the themes and how they talked about a really sensitive topic. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I also made some really amazing lifelong friends while I was there. I learned a lot about myself and a completely different part of the world and science. So really recommend studying abroad and doing research while you're there if you can. So at that point, I had officially fallen in love with research, and I knew I wanted to keep doing it. So I applied to graduate school. Graduate school is kind of a time where you can work full-time just doing research and taking classes. And you become an expert in something that you're passionate about. So I wanted to do that. I applied to Brandeis and I got accepted. And actually, the first time that I told a faculty member in undergrad that I wanted to go to graduate school, they told me they thought it would be too much for a first-gen college student to handle. And so that was hard to hear. I started kind of consciously trying to hide my accent because I had a little bit stronger of a Southern accent, and avoiding discussing my life before college. And it was hard. I was overworking myself, but I had some amazing undergraduate mentors They helped me learn how to dress and speak professionally. They encouraged my passion for research, and they helped me understand the college system a lot better. That was the part that was especially helpful. I owe a lot to them. So find those people and don't be afraid to ask a ton of questions. So after getting accepted to Brandeis, I did my master's in 1 year. And then I enjoyed the research I was doing with my lab, and I decided to stay and start the PhD program. So right now I'm in my 4th year of a 5-year PhD program, and next year I plan to graduate and be the first doctor in my family. Right now, my research kind of combines all of the things that I liked since high school. I think it's a really creative process because I'm researching something new that hasn't been done before, and it's science. But also, I am looking both at brains and cultures. So I really enjoy it. But right now, my focus is on looking at what happens when different cultures interact. So if you think about someone from China and America, there's a lot of work showing that they think about things in a different way, and we can see that even when we look at brain patterns. And I look specifically at how people remember things. And so what I'm interested in is what happens when an American goes to China, sort of like when I studied abroad, what change happens in the way that we think and how we remember things. So I show people different images on a screen, and I look at their brain waves with something called electroencephalography, or EEG, which is this really cool thing. You have a bunch of electrodes and you put it on someone's scalp, and magically you can read their brain signals in real time. So then I can compare their brain signals in different conditions, different things that they're seeing, or between groups of people. And I really love it. I get to combine all of my interests together. I get to learn about them for the rest of my life. And every day I'm doing something new and learning something I didn't know that I didn't know. And I've met a ton of amazing people who also love science along the way. And again, these people have been such an amazing support system for me to get through graduate school. And I can't stress enough how important it is to put yourself out there, even if you're shy, even if you don't know what you should be asking. Just be open to meeting new people and asking questions, going to office hours with your professors, and asking for help when you need it. I used to think that if I relied on someone else, it meant that there was something wrong with me or I wasn't doing enough. But actually, everyone does it and everyone should do it. And nobody knows everything. And that's what makes science really fun. And that's all I have. If you have questions, please reach out to me.